So, come to the one of the important chapter of the CNS, cerebral cortex. When we are talking about a central nervous system, or when you will think about central nervous system, main part which come is about the cerebral cortex. It is a outermost layer and biggest portion of the brain. And almost all functions of the central nervous system is regulated by the cerebral cortex. Now, if you see the structure by cerebral cortex and other things, cerebral cortex is divided into various layers. The outermost layer is made up of the soma of the neurons. That's why that outer layer is called gray matter. And in inner layer of the or subcortical regions, it is more of the axons, and that's called white matter. So, if you see the anatomical features of the cerebral cortex, first we'll talk about external features, and depend upon its locations the to and for our better understanding we divide the cerebral cortex into a different part. Now we'll not call cerebral cortex completely as a cerebral cortex, but it's also called a cerebrum, because we cannot consider the function of cerebrum only on the upper layer, but whole cerebrum will work as a one unit. So cerebrum, if you see, a whole brain is made up of two different part of the cerebrum which connected to each other through the connected tracts, that is called corpus callosum. So these two cerebrums are a half portion on the right side and half portion on the left side. They are called cerebral hemispheres. And these all two, the cerebral hemisphere are divided by the one of the deepest fissure, that is called median longitudinal fissure, and it is connected somewhere here in between in circular fashion by the connecting tract. Commissure, we can also call it the commissure tract between left side and right side, and that is called corpus callosums. If you see, cerebellum is usually divided into three poles. One is frontal pole, posterior pole, and temporal pole. These are pointed structure which present in the cerebral cortex. Frontal pole is the anterior portion. This is the where the frontal pole is located. While occipital lobe is a posterior most portion. Here you can see the elevations little bit. That is a occipital pole, and temporal pole is somewhere just above the ear. So this is the area where you can see temporal pole. Surface wise, cerebrum is divided into three surfaces. One is superolateral surfaces. So it is divided with the medial fissure, and this area is superolateral fissure because it is completely one piece. So we cannot, superior and lateral we cannot differentiate. That's why it's together named as a superior lateral surface. Then central, because of division of the medial longitudinal fissure, central portion is divided. That is called medial surface, which facing each other. And here lower portion, that is inferior portion, the inferior surface. Even inferior surface are divided into two parts. One which is at the level of the orbits are called anterior orbital portions, and one in the posterior level are called posterior tentorial portion. So this surface is the anterior orbital portion, and this is posterior temporal portion. Okay, this is how the we can describe the cerebrum. Now come to the feature called sulci and gyra. These are similar like that earth, कहीं पे पहाड़ है, कहीं पे खाई है. Similarly, cerebral hemisphere is not very smooth structure. It has elevations and depressions. That elevations are called gyra, while those are depressions or fissures are called sulci. So there are multiple foldings are of the surface is there, and that forms as grooves and fissures. That grooves are usually called as a gyra, while the fissures are called sulci. Some fissures are very deep enough, and that divide the cerebrum into different layers like a temporal lobe, frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, all those things with the help of the these gyres. And because of this folding and all those things, uneven surface, it increases the surface area of the cerebrum. That's overall surface area of the cerebrum is somewhere around 2200 square meter. Then come to the different lobes of the cerebral hemisphere. As I said, because of the fissure, like a central sulcus, this central sulcus will divide the cerebrum frontal lobe. from the rest of the cerebrum. So frontal lobe is anterior to the central sulcus, also called as a fissure of Rolando, and it is usually majorly concerned with the emotions, analysis, and also motor behavior, motor functions. While parietal lobe is the posterior portion of the central sulcus and anterior portion of the parieto-occipital sulcus. This portion is a parietal lobe, and it is mainly concerned with the uh, sensory functions. Like it receives the all type of the sensation, including auditory and all those things. Then come to the temporal lobe. Temporal lobe is the one of the lowest most portion of the mm, brain, and it is divided by the another imaginary line sulcus will be there, that posterior ramus of the lateral sulcus, and this is majorly concerned with the hearing, speech, which is also related to the analysis and calculation, other things. Then come to the occipital lobe. It is a posterior most portion, and it is lies behind the parieto-occipital sulcus, and it is majorly concerned with the vision. So this is a, rough functioning distribution and anatomical distribution. Then come to the um, Brodmann's areas. Brodmann divide the different areas of the uh, cerebral cortex depend upon their functioning type. So he stimulated each and every areas and what type of the functions performed by the brain. Accordingly, he developed different areas. You can go through this. We can't go in detail. Like 1, 2, 3 will form usually primary motor cortex, while 4 is sorry primary sensory cortex, while 4 will form somewhere around motor cortex, which you should remember. Then 5 and 7 are more related to the associated motor cortex, sorry, associated sensory cortex, while 6 and 8 are usually related to the motor areas. So associated motor areas, frontal eye areas, similarly different, like 14 and 22 are more related to the auditory area, 17, 18 are 19 are related to more to the visual areas, while 39, 40, 40 to 43 are more related to speech areas. So according to their different functions, they named different type of these areas, and that is also called as a cytoarchitecture of the mm, cortex. Then these are the various numbers, like motor areas include Brodmann's area 4, 6, 8, and supplementary motor area, while sensory area include area number 1, 2, 3, and 5, 7, and also 40, area number 40. Well, auditory area include 41, 42, and 22. So detailed functions हम individual functions देखेंगे. There will try to understand what is. When we are saying primary area, it is usually associated with the reception of the functions or execution of the reception of the senses or execution of the function. Well, associated areas are usually trying to understand that function, analyze, modification, calculations, and perception. Suppose if it is sensory input, then analyze that sensory input and then send it to the other areas or communicate with the other areas. Or if it is motor function, then planning and programming of the particular motor action. So that is usually function of the association areas. Then if you see the speech area include both sensory and motors. Motor area is involved in uh, execution of the speech, while sensory area is understanding the language, reading, whatever you are seeing it, to analyze those things. That is what sensory area is involved. So many times sensory area is also called as a intelligent area because many thought process are usually we do in a language. जैसे आप कुछ भी imagine करते हो तो you are imagining it in the form of language. So whatever analysis, calculation, decisions, everything you do in the form of language. That's why the sensory speech area is also called as a intelligent area. The smell area is area 21 and gustatory area 43. Okay. Many times you don't get MCQs depend upon these areas कि इस area का क्या function है. Rarely you will get, but it is good to know if you know these numberings. Now we'll see the different portion of the cortex. and depend upon their evolutionary, how the cortex devolve. So oldest form of the cortex, which is seen in the lower animals, are called allocortex. And now in our cortex, it only forms about 10% of the total cortex, and this is also involved or called as a archipallidum, that involve hippocampus and cingulate gyrus. So this portion, hippocampal and cingulate gyrus, and also pallipadium, that is old cortex, usually involve uncus and parahippocampal gyrus, piriform area. Or these are this green, dark green portion is an example of one of the oldest cortex, allocortex. And it is usually related to the more of the limbic system, and that is related to the emotions and behavior and maintenance of body postures and basic communications. While mesocortex is the area between the allocortex and neocortex, and this is comprised usually of parahippocampal gyrus and subcumulant. While majorly portion of our human brain are involved in neocortex, which is also called as a isocortex. 90% of the brain is forms the part of neocortex, and this is most evolved form of the animal brain, or you can call it mammalian brain, and that contain a much higher functions. So for that you can understand this ABCD. A is a actual brain of rat. Then more higher animal, if you go, B is for a cat, C is for the monkey, while this is for the brain. This is how our brain is evolved and become more matured, and we can now, our more complex function is performed by our brain. Can any one of it to one of the most complex function performed by our brain, which cannot be performed by any animal? आप ऐसा कौन सा काम कर सकते हो जो कोई जानवर नहीं करता?
सर स्पीकिंग
स्पीच.
बोल सकते हैं,
स्पीच.
स्पीच कर
या
थिंक कर सकते हैं.
जानवर भी सोचता है, but speech is one of the most complex function which done by human brain, which is not able to perform by the lower animals.
तोता भी बोल सकता है.
वो बेटा कॉपी करता है. बोलने में और कॉपी में फर्क समझता है?
यस सर.
When Tota say, what is your name?
मोमिन सुहेल मलिक.
Okay. Malik.
Yes, sir.
When Tota say, Malik, I love you, he doesn't mean what is meant
Thank
by
you,
I
sir.
love you, or he doesn't mean what is meant by Malik. You say, he will repeat it. But when we speak, we know the understand the meaning and all those things. That is what I'm talking about. Is a speech, which cannot be performed by the other animal. Okay, अब speech पे अगर हमारा पूरा class हो जाएगा, then you will realize कि what is the difference between that तोता का बोलना और हमारे बोलने में. Because it involves a lot of things when we are speaking. Because it involves your emotions, it involves your thought process. अभी मैं आपको ऐसा भी इंग्लिश में पढ़ के बता रहा हूँ. Phylogenetic division of the cerebral cortex, allocortex, and suppose I am telling you, okay, this brain is doing this activity and all those things activity. I'm not thinking in English because my English is my native, not native language. Always think in Marathi. Then that things goes. Suppose you ask me some question in English, I will listen it in English. Then it goes to my sensory speech area. Their hearing area, they will associate that, try to understand, and they send it to the Wernicke's area. Wernicke's area will convert that English into Marathi. Then my brain will understand what you ask me. Then I develop that answer. That answer will also develop in Marathi. Then it will be converted into English, and then it goes to the motor area, and then I will speak in English. अभी जो कुछ भी मैं बोल रहा हूँ, all those things happening in Marathi in my brain, and then it's coming in English. Understand? This is what a speech, where you need to understand what you are speaking. It is not like you are repeating what you are hearing and you are repeating. Then it is not a speech. Many times you mimic various artists. their dialogues you mimic, but you don't understand. Then it doesn't involve your Wernicke's error and anything. It is just a motor area which you are repeating that sound. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Then come to the histological structure of cerebral cortex. Cerebral cortex is almost formed by the 6 different layers. When we vertically form, the gray matter is there. That gray matter is 6 different layer. First layer, outermost layer is formed by the flexiform layer, which is usually has a transverse fibers, horizontal fibers, and they communicate with each other cells. Then next layer will come with the external granular cell, which contain stellate cells and pyramidal cells. These are very important cells which performs maximum cortical functions. Then out of after this there will be outer pyramidal layer, which again contain the stellate cells and pyramidal cells. Then there will be the internal granular layer, which there will be synapses and bondings between the different cells that forms the band-like structure that is called external band of Ballinger. Then below that there will be the inner pyramidal cell, or also called the ganglionic cell layer, which contain more giant pyramidal cells and also contain internal band of the Ballinger. And then lowermost portion is the fusiform cells or modified pyramidal cells. Now there are many cells, and how these cells perform different functions. There are different connections will be there that we will see. So if you see pyramidal cells, it almost seen in the all cortical layers from layer 1 to layer 6. These are usually pyramidal shape like this, triangular shape, and that's why name is given pyramidal cell. And they had a central axis base in the cell, and they will send a long uh, dendrites and send it to the long central axis, which is long axons, and send fibers to the uh, upper layers, to the molecular plexiform layers, and it also sends the large dendrites to the other parts of basal angles, and their majority of they are present in second layer, third layer, and fifth layer, and that's why name is given that pyramidal cell layers, outer and inner pyramidal cell layer. Then come to another cell, that is a granule cells or stellate cells, as name suggests. These are usually very small bodies and star-shaped like structures. There are multiple dendrites which spread in all directions, and they are majorly present in layer 4. Though they present in other layers also, but the major concentration is in a layer 4 along with the external band of Ballinger. And they usually uh, more found in a primary sensory cortex, while pyramidal cells are more found in a motor cortex. Then come to the fusiform cells. These are very rare number, and they're usually in the lowermost layer they are present. And they are in the spindle cell, and they also send the various dendrites and synapses with the other different layers. Then come to the this laminae of the neocortex. It forms as the 6 layers, molecular plexiform layers, which is first layer, and which is usually made up of transverse fibers, which is usually come from the pyramidal cells and axons of the stellate and Martoni cells from the deeper layers, and these forms horizontal cells of the Kajal also, which are present here in the plexiform layer. Then come to the external granular cells. This is a very small layer, a thin layer, and it is usually had a lots of small pyramidal cells, and it gets the afferent and efferent projection fibers from the different layers, and dendrites of the cells from the third layers also goes to there, and it usually forms a site of where synapses of the different axons will occur at this layer, and it forms the small white substances of the hemisphere. Then come to the outer pyramidal cell. These are majority of the pyramidal cells present in this layer, along with a very small number of the stellates and basket cells. These are small cells will lies more superficially, while larger cells are lies more deeper layer. Then come to the internal granular layer. These are usually densely packed stellate cells along with the transverse aggregations of the fibers. that is also called as the external band of bell agar. Then come to the inner pyramidal layer. This is also forms the large pyramidal cells, and it is very much developing motor cortex as compared to other layers. And these larger cells are also called as a bed cells. These are pyramidal cells, just variety of the pyramidal cells. And these layers form the fibers together, and they lie parallel to this layer, and that is called internal band of Ballerger. Then come to the multiform or polymorphous layer cells, which contain fusiform cells, stellate cells, and also some pyramidal cells. And the variety of the shape of these cells are present, and they usually communicate with the white matter of the cerebral cortex. And usually this layer will not inseparable from the white matter, so they almost homogeneous with the white matter of the cerebral cortex. Now, if you see these almost whole these fibers coming from the all layers will goes to the thalamus, and same type of the lamines will make in the thalamic nucleus from 1 to 6. While the anterior projections are coming from the thalamic nucleus, and they usually goes to the reticular system of the all lamines of the cortex. And lamina 2 and lamina 4 are usually more related to the input, that sensory parts come to there, while lamina 3 and lamina 4 are more related to the output of the cortex, that is usually motor or vesiculomotor or secretomotor activities will be done. While lamina 1 and lamina 6 will usually associate with integration between both sensory motor and behavior. So it is usually associated with the sensory motor activity, both sensory cortex and motor cortex. Now come to the functions of frontal lobe or frontal lobe. As I already suggest, frontal lobe is lies just below the central primary sulcus, just anterior to that central sulcus, and above the uh, posterior ramus of the lateral sulcus. This whole portion will form frontal lobe. It is almost contribute to 1/3 of the total surface of the cortex. And this as it is anterior to the central circle, it is also called as the precentral cortex, and anterior portion is called prefrontal lobe. So this 1 minute, this quadrangular portion is called precentral cortex, while this anterior portion is called prefrontal cortex. So now come to the precentral cortex. Precentral cortex usually refers to the posterior part of the frontal lobe and anterior to the central sulcus, precentral gyrus, and posterior part of the superior, middle, and inferior frontal gyri. All those will include the precentral cortex. Whenever we stimulate this area, it will show the contraction of the skeletal muscle, different part of the skeletal muscle. That suggests that this area is mostly related to the motor activity. And that's why it is also called as the excitomotor area of the cortex. And stimulation of this area also produce some sensory perception, that is usually related to the position sense. So they also receive the sensation from the body. That's why this many times it is referred as a sensory motor cortex. Now come to the Brodmann's areas. The precentral area shows area 4, which is a primary motor area, and also premotor area, that is 6, 8, 44, and 45. And along with that, it also shows supplementary motor area. Area 4 will extend from the precentral gyrus to the medial paracentral lobule of the medial surface, while anterior wall of the central sulcus and other gyra of the frontal lobe. It contains all 6 layers जो हमने ये 6 layer बताते हैं. All 6 layers are present in prefrontal gyrus, but out of these the giant pyramidal cells are present in a large number, and it forms thin granular layer of the cortex, and they involve in a more of the motor activity. And if you see the topographical representation, this is a topographical representation of motor cortex. Out of this, if you see, the tongue has a very much larger area, Face, eyes, lips, jaws has a very much larger area, while thumb and finger has a very much larger area, while foot, leg, trunk has a very smaller, depend upon their body surface area. And because of these different areas, it shows a thumb has a large area, so you can do more minute activity, more high skill activity with this, while trunk, legs, and all those things, they are a low area, so there are more uh, unskilled activity you will do, or more power uh, involved activity you will do by these areas like shoulder, trunk, and all those things. While skill activity will be done by finger, lips, tongue. They are doing skill activity because they are involved in a speech, while eye movement, they're involved in eye movement and all those things. So they minutely has to adjust small muscles. So these muscles has a one-on-one representation on the cortex, while muscles of the legs, foot, trunk will have a group of the muscles will have the very less neuron representation in the cortex, and it is always upright presentation. So this is a medial portion, medial surface of the motor cortex, while this is superior lateral, and the tongue and swallowing will show inferior surface of the motor cortex. This function of this front precentral cortex is usually involved in voluntary movement of the opposite half of the body, contralateral half of the body, and also in the speech. Then come to the premotor area, that is involve primary motor area and uh, anterior to the primary motor area, that is 6, 8, 44, and 41. Area 6 usually lies to the superior, middle, inferior to the frontal gyrus, and they are divided into two portions, 6A and 6B. And these usually contribute to the pyramidal cells. So fibers coming from this area goes to the pyramidal tract, and they usually has some representation as that of the primary motor area. So topographical representation also has a same, and they usually involved in voluntary movement and coordination between the voluntary movement, and also more accurate and smooth execution of the scaled movement, that writing, or if you're doing painting, or playing some musical instrument, all those skill activity will be associated with this area number 6. If damage occur to this, then it will be very difficult to perform this skill movement. Then electrical stimulation of the both area 4 or 6 will shows the moment of the same type of the movement, but the area 4 will show more stronger, area 6 will require more stronger stimulation as compared to area 4 to activate the same or to perform the same movement. So whenever the damage occur to the area 6, it will lead to a loss of skill movement. It also produces a grasping reflex. That is, grasping reflex is like that when if you see your any small infant less than 1 year, and if you put a finger in their hand, they will hold it. That is what a grasping reflex. That is involuntary, which we lost as we growing. And also this along with the lesion, along with the forehip occur, it can produce spastic paralysis or hemiplegia. Then come to the area 8. It is also called as the frontal eye field area, and it is located just anterior to the area 6, and it receives impulses from the occipital lobe and also dorsomedial nucleus of the thalamus, and it sends output to the nucleus of third, fourth, and sixth cranial nerve, which involve in voluntary movement of the eye. So it actually involve in a control of the eye movement. So when you stimulate these areas, it shows the movement of the eyeball to the opposite side, and also causes opening and closing of the eyelid and dilatation and lacrimation of the dilation of the pupil, and also lacrimation. So when you how can I explain? Okay, eye movement. So uh, in a small kid, you can hold his face, and if you shake his head, if you shake his head in this direction, his eyes move in opposite direction. Same thing, when you shake in opposite direction, eyes moves in opposite direction. This is what uh, regulation of the eye movement. So it will fix the visual field. If so, when you move here and here, So your eyes will center on that area. So it will regulate that eye movement so that your field of vision will be fixed. So if any lesion occur to this, so I will turn towards the affected side. The conjugate movement means uh, uh, similar movement when my left eye moves to the right side, so right eye will also move towards the right side. This is not a same movement. Same movement should be like this, but this is conjugate movement. And this conjugate movement is lost when this lesion occur to the area. Yet and pupil and eyelids will not much affected because it also has a control with Edinger Westphal nucleus. So that will taken care by the pupil and movement of the pupil and eyelids. Then come to the Broca's speech area or area 44 and 45. It is usually located to inferior to the frontal gyrus, and it is usually involved in a movement of the structures which involve in voice production, articulation of the speech, activation of the vocal cord, stimulation of the movement of the mouth, tongue, lip when you're during the speech. And if the damage occur to this area, it can cause motor aphasia. So in this motor aphasia, there will be difficulty in producing the words or difficulty in speaking. If the completely damaged, then there will be no movement occur. So you will not able to speak. But if partially damaged, you might able to produce some words, but it will not be articulated properly. So pronunciation might not be proper, but you can repeat it and you can understand the meaning of words you are speaking. And whatever you are hearing also, that also you can understand. This is what a motor aphasia. Sensory aphasia is opposite to that. Sensory aphasia, you can initiate the words very smoothly, very fluently. You can speak, but those words are meaningless. You don't understand what you are speaking. You want to speak something else, some other words are coming, or whatever you are listening also, that also you will not able to understand. Then come to the supplementary motor area. These are usually located into the rostral of frontal lobe to the primary motor area. Uh, it is usually as a upper body located dorsal and okay, and those of the lower bodies, and these are usually associated with attitudinal positions or attitudes of the body when you are speaking or doing any voluntary movement. Then fixation of the movement and different part of the body, and acquired a proper position of the head and eyes while performing any action. Then come to the connections of the precentral cortex. The afferents which receive these fibers receives from the nearby areas like through the sensory somatosensory area from the parietal cortex, also from the frontal cortex of anterior motor areas, and subcortical fibers from the auditory and visual cortex also they receive. Then they receive from the opposite hemisphere also through the same part corresponding areas of the ocellular corpus callosum. Then also receives the fibers from the thalamus through ventrolateral and ventroanterior nucleus, and also through the interlaminar nuclei of the thalamus. Efferent, it gives rise to the one of the important tract that called as the pyramidal tract, or also called as the cortico spinal tract, and that goes from the cortex to the anterior horn cell of the spinal cord. Apart from this, it also sends fibers to the adjacent areas like axons of the bed cells, then collateral areas uh, uh, that inhibit the collateral areas so that the precise action will be there and sharpen the area which has to be stimulated. Then it sends fibers to the basal ganglia, specifically to the caudate nucleus and putamen, then red nucleus, from there, it starts rubrospinal fiber, then reticular substance. It goes from reticulospinal tract, then vestibular nuclei it sends, and then from vestibular spinal tract, and also it sends to the pontine nucleus, and from pontocerebral fibers, and also sends to inferior olivar nucleus, and from olivocerebral tract. So, uh, cortex also gives uh, uh, origin from the of the pyramidal tract, and also forms the origin of extrapyramidal tract. So extrapyramidal tract is also arises from the motor cortex, but it goes through the different area. Then come to the prefrontal cortex, or also called as the prefrontal lobe or orbitofrontal cortex, and it is usually located anterior to the motor area, lying in the area 8, 44, and major areas of the Brodmanns like 19 to 14, 23, 24, 29, 33, 44, and 47, 45, 46, and 47. The connections, these prefrontal areas receives a lot vast connections. So it receives the impulses from the anterior nucleus of the thalamus, and it also receives from the dorsomedial nucleus of the thalamus. And all these fibers project not only from 8, 9 to 12, but also it dorsomedial nucleus also sends fibers to the area 44 to 47. This anterior nucleus receives sends the fibers to the 23, 24, 29, 32, and these are usually related to hypothalamus. They receive the fibers from the hypothalamus and hippocampus, and then from there it project to the motor cortex. The prefrontal lobes from the closed circuit connections with the uh, thalamus and hippocampal areas, and this total circuit is called Papez circuit, and this usually Papez circuit is responsible for the uh, uh, emotions and behavior, and whatever EEG recording we are doing it the activity of Papez circuit. So this is a diagram for the Papez circuit. So fibers comes from the anterior thalamus go to cingulate gyrus. From cingulate gyrus it goes to hippocampus. From hippocampus it again go to mammillary body. And from mammillary body it goes to the anterior nucleus of the thalamus. This is how the Papez circuit will be formed. Then afferents coming from the thalamus. Afferents coming from the frontal lobe. It goes to thalamus. The fibers from area 9 to 10 it goes to the ventral and medial thalamic nuclei. Then it goes to the reticular formation also from the area 9 to 10. Then pontine nucleus also receives the fibers from the area 10. Then caudate nucleus receives from the area 8 to 4, 5, and discharge to the caudate nucleus. Then mammillary bodies also receive fibers from the area 30. Then come to the functions. So prefrontal lobe has a function of more, it is associated with the planning and programming and sequencing of the voluntary movement. It also receives involved in higher functions like emotions, learning, memory, and your social behavior, and also various autonomic changes occur in the emotional condition, which has a connection with the hypothalamus and all those things. So autonomic responses also can be generated by stimulating the prefrontal lobe. Then it is also a site where intelligence is lies. So short-term memory is usually registered in prefrontal cortex, while long-term is registered in Wernicke's areas. Then it also keep on tracking of the informations, and also it plays very important role in a recall of the information, that is remembering. And that's why it is also called as a organ of mind or seat of intelligence. Then it controls the intellectual activities like prognosticate means when you find any situation, how to react to that situation, and how to deal, analyze your social behavior, or you can to plan your future कि अगर मैं ऐसा करूँगा तो क्या होगा, if I do this what will happen, if I don't do this what will happen, and accordingly it helps us to make a decision. Then it can also think the consequences of any motor actions what you are going to perform, and it analyzes whether that depend upon previous experiences this action should be better or this action should be better, and accordingly it will help you to make a proper decision. Apart from this, it can also do the mathematical calculation, philosophical problems or legal problems, all those can also be done with this prefrontal area. And also, uh, uh, like a doctor, it can help us to do a rare diagnosis also. So it is basically more of the intelligence part and related to memory and learning. Then frontal lobe syndrome, where it refers when there is any injury or damage occur to the frontal lobe, or when suppose there is tumor occur, we remove the frontal lobe, the frontal lobectomy will be done. Then there is this disease occur. Okay, before going ahead, we'll take 5 minutes break.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, yes.
Yes, sir.
Now come to the frontal lobe syndrome. It is usually when there is a occur injury to the prefrontal lobe, or when we surgically remove. That is called frontal lobectomy. How this how the patient will present himself. So first thing, he will not have any insight. He will not feel that he is a sick or there is some problem with him. Okay, so this is called lack of insight. So insight will not be there. He will have flight of ideas. He can have very bizarre plannings, and very irrelevant, unrealistic planning will be there. He will be emotionally very unstable. Sometimes he'll become very aggressive. He will stay restless. Sometimes he'll become very sorrow. Sometimes he'll become very euphoric, very happy without any reason. So all those things will be there. Then there will be a recent memory loss. So he will able to know his name, address, and all those things. But the recent what he had in morning, or what he had in lunch, and all those things. So there will be recent memory loss will be there. Then his behavior will not be as per the social norms or moral norms. It will not be there. So the common sense will not be there. Then he will have lack of attention, or he will not able to concentrate what you are speaking or what you are talking. So all those things will not be there. He might be get a depression. Intellectual activities will not be there. He will not able to do solve simple mathematical calculations. All those things will not be there. And if damage to occur other things, it can cause hyperphagia. Uh, Urinary or bladder activity will not be voluntary control. So autonomic bladder, autonomic defecation can occur. Then orientation with time, place, person will not be there. Motor activity will be slightly disturbed, so tremor and all those things will be there. Incoordinated motor activity will be there. So all those features you can see when this damage occur to the prefrontal lobe. Now come to the parietal lobe. Parietal lobe is situated in the lateral portion, posterior to the posterior to the central gyrus, and anterior to the parieto-occipital sulcus. The rectangular structure will be there, or more called trapezoid structure will be there. That is a parietal lobe, and it will lie above the temporal lobe. There are different areas present in the parietal lobe. One is a primary sensory area. So this is somewhere 1, 2, 3 from primary sensory area. The secondary sensory area, and then associated sensory areas. That is Brodmann area 5, 7 will be there. And it also topographically represent in opposite directions, same way that like that of the motor. And come to the primary sensory area. It is just posterior to the central gyrus, and it also called the post-central posterior sulcus, and it also called the post-central gyrus. That is just anterior part of the parietal lobe, and it includes the area 1, 2, and 3. And apart from this, it also All these will be there, and stellate cells are densely well developed as compared to pyramidal cell, and large pyramidal cells will not be there in the primary sensory cortex. If you see topographic representation, it is also upside down, and if here also you see the lips, tongues, uh, index finger has a much larger representation as compared to rest of the body, because these are the area which is highly sensitive, and even localization is very accurate on the tip of the fingers, and this will give you little idea about what stereognosis and all those things can be there. So on stimulation of this area will produce sensations. That sensation will be very vague. It can be like numbness, giggling, or sometimes also like a pain sensation also there. And if lesions occur to this area, then it will causes a loss of sensory function. But here, complete sensory function will not loss, because thalamus also has the ability to perceive. So in this case, patient able to perceive the sensation, but will not able to localize what side of the body or what portion of the body has stimulated. That will be not properly localized, and it will usually affect the opposite half of the body. Then come to secondary sensory areas. It is situated to the post-central gyrus. An area of the face is on first somatic sensory area, and it is buried into the Salvalian fissure. Topographical representation is similarly like that of the sensory area, primary sensory area, and it also represents directly to the thalamus. And on stimulation will produce a waste sensation. It also excited by the touch and auditory and other type of sensation. And if lesions occur, discrimination power is usually affected. Then come to the sensory association areas. These include area 5, 7, and area 14. Area 5 usually is posterior to the primary sensory area of the parietal lobe, and it reacts to the passive and active orientation of the joint. So it's a proprioception will be carries, and is also receives tactile stimulus and other sensation point-to-point representation of the other sensations. Area 7 is located to the superior parietal lobules, and this is usually concerned with the elaborate analysis of the discrimination between the two different stimulus. Area 14 is higher association areas, and it is usually located in the supramarginal gyrus and concerned with the stereognosis. And if lesions occur to this area, can produce a stereognosis, that is, you will not able to identify the objects by just touching or not seeing. Connections of parietal lobes. The somatosensory areas, also called as S1, is received from the posteromedial and posterolateral part of the thalamus, and also it receives a proprioceptive impulsion from the contralateral side of the and both sides of the face. The lower part of the posterior act as a taste receptor centers. Then come to the secondary somatic sensory areas. It receives the afferent projection from the primary sensory area and also from the thalamus. For sensory association areas, is usually receives areas impulses from the primary and secondary sensory areas. Then come to the efferent. It sends the impulses to the pyramidal cells and contribute to the body position sense and voluntary movement in corticospinal, corticobulbar, and cortical nuclear tract. These fibers also send sensory input to the entry zone of each posterior gray column of the spinal cord of the nucleus gracilis and cuneatus from the medulla, and all somatosensory areas and fibers sends to the caudate nucleus and putamen nucleus. And it also sends input to the thalamic projection of nucleus and also to tectum, pons, and cerebellum. The association fibers also come from the sensory cortex, and these connected to other different cortical areas from the other hemisphere, and also from the primary and secondary area to the area 4 also has a nearby areas. The commissural fibers which sends to the opposite hemisphere from sensory one area to the contralateral primary area and also to the contralateral secondary sensory area. while secondary sensory area only sent to the contralateral secondary sensory area. Then come to the functions of the parietal lobe. It is usually associated with the localization, analyzation, and discrimination between the different type of the cutaneous sensation and proprioceptive sensations. Secondary somatic area is usually associated with the perception of the sensations and also representation of the different body parts to the secondary, primary and secondary areas. The association areas is associated with the Vishu. Then come to the higher association area. It is usually recognized with the common identification of the common familiar object just by touching with your fingers, and that is called stereognosis. Inferior part of the posterior central gyrus is usually associated with taste sensations and general sensation of the tongue also. Angular gyrus is usually associated with the tactile localization, two-point discrimination, and accurate estimation of the extent and intensity of the strength and joint position. Then come to the applied aspect. Whenever the damage occur to the unilateral parietal lobe, it will result in a defective perception of the sensations, specifically proprioception and fine touch, an opposite half of the body, and it leads to discrimination, localization, and of the sensations, and intensity of the sensation will be improper. And as the proprioception has proprioceptive sensation has been lost, it leads to ataxia, that is unable to control voluntary movement. If bilaterally both parietal lobes has been removed, then there will be complete loss of tactile sensation and visual sensation, and person will not able to even stand with the closed eyes, and movements will be very irregular. Then removal of the inferior parietal lobules, unilateral lesions will cause marked failure of sensory perception, body image cannot be appreciated, and he will not aware of its rest of the half of the body. He will not take care of this half of body, that he will shave only half of the beard, and one half body will be completely neglected. Similarly, when bilateral lesion will be there, then there will be the only coarse tactile perception will be there, while visual placing of the body and copying of any design, that will not be possible, and especially he will not able to orient himself into the his body. So I think our time is over, so we should stop here. Any questions, any doubt? Thank you very much. Have a nice day.